down when the kingship was lowered from heaven? Are we the descendants of the Anunnaki?
And actually, believe it or not, but in the Middle Ages, Ethiopia was repeatedly referred to as the place of Saint John the Baptist. There could be two possible reasons for this. First of all, because Ethiopia was a Christian country. Yes, here are just two of the numerous medieval quotes which you can find in the works of Anatoly Fomenko. It describes Ethiopia as a place of monasteries and bishops. It also specifies the dark-skinned monks outnumbered the white-skinned. So probably there weren't that few pale-skinned anyway. And the other reason for which Ethiopia was the place of Saint John the Baptist could have been that, believe it or not, but in the Middle Ages, Ethiopia was to be found primarily in Europe, in Africa as well, but it was a European phenomenon. Yes, in the medieval books, the name Ethiopia was very often always related to, let's say, Germany or Siberia, things like that. Now, what we now call Ethiopia was called Abyssinia, mainly, so to say. Of course, other names would be used, like here, it is called India, nowadays Ethiopia. Okay, to make it more clear, even than that, here is your Ethiopian Ocean. Of course, thousands of kilometers away from any Ethiopia. And that map was not an exception. This was the norm here as well. Ethiopic Ocean. In modern language, this Southern Atlantic Ocean. So what is going on here? It is very important to understand what's going on. In the relatively recent past, they changed almost all geographical names. And that was done with the specific and very clear intention in mind to make old texts and old maps, which by chance have escaped parasitic destruction, unreadable and not understandable for the people who would come in future. So that's how they took care of the written history. Now let's see how did they take care of the actual historic sites. Let's visit a site located in the very capital of Ethiopia, Addis Ababa.
Ironically, located just outside the city's main university, in the area which is currently devoted to trash disposal, the ruins of an impressive medieval, so-called European-style fortress still stick out here and there from the trash. At places, the walls are preserved, even up to a height of about 4 meters.
Remains of many towers are still seen, and the full fortress has a very regular pentagonal shape, something which is typical for the so-called European star forts. The place is neglected to such an extent that I couldn't even discover its name. Just travelers talk about some ruins next to the University of Addis Ababa, where they must be teaching history, I guess. Do they? That so-called history deals only with the illiterate Africans who lived in huts, and that is to prepare them for the next stage of the parasitic plans, where they don't even have huts anymore even. And because they know that there are still some normal people left who will realize that this is seriously wrong, for them they have a different story. You see, kindly they are giving them a small check, and in this way the good people have to become convinced that they have done everything possible. Which is yet another illusion from the parasitic paradigm, because what we should do actually if we want to put end to this nonsense and starvation is first of all abolish central banking and get back to an honest monetary system. And once the packs of banksters no longer can create unlimited free money for themselves, then they won't be able to buy off entire countries, as they do in Africa now, and the earth will slowly recover from the dark ages of the banksterism, and people of different color will again live like before, along each other as equals. Excessive hoarding of money should be also declared illegal. These artificial gaps in the society between rich and poor are only artificially created in order to keep us in constant fear and to instigate hatred. We no longer need politicians who waste our time with small talks about reforms, adjusting the conditions of slavery. We need politicians who will end up the slavery to the banksters. So the people of Africa, as the people of all continents, were regularly visited and helped by human and non-human angels. For example, the story of the tribe of the Dogons is somewhat different. Their angels came from Sirius, the star of Sirius. Some researchers found also confirmation to this legend that the people of the tribe tell in terms of advanced astronomy knowledge, which the Dogons could not have obtained in any reasonable way, keeping in mind their relatively primitive lifestyle.
So, let me show you some images of the indigenous original inhabitants of Africa. No, there's no confusion with the images. It's them. It's the Berbers. On one side, the mainstream penguins don't deny that these are the original inhabitants of northern and even central Africa. And on the other hand, they assure us dark-skinned people live in Africa because they were fried under the sun for many thousands of years, and that is why they became black. So how come some were getting fried and became black, and others were there in the same furnace conditions and remained rare and uncooked? The proper method for spotting and exposing liars has always been the same. As they continue to fabricate new and newer stories, the mountain peak of lies becomes so high that it's impossible anymore for all the stories to match. Actually, as you saw in the previous episode about Australia, I believe, the Berbers simply belonged to that initial wave of survivors' culture. As we call it, the people who tattooed their faces. And it's no surprise that we aren't being told the truth about their origin in northern Africa, because it was the same in Australia, in Peru, in China, in Siberia. Burials and mummies of Caucasian blonde people are found, but they never find time to include them in the official history. And the Berbers not only look Slavic, their writing is also very similar to the runes used in Europe. Now, the ancient African languages are basically part of this worldwide rune-like writing system. And the mainstream historians are so busy finding the differences between the different types of runes and giving them all completely different names, so that they look like a completely different writing system. They're so busy with that they fail to make the main observation, which is that on all continents without exception, these writings are found. Not even one continent is without them. That they belong to a single culture. How is it that they are assuring us that everybody evolved independently and was discovered at some point by the colonialists? But they were all using the same writing before their so-called discovery. Why is that?
So they're telling me this is an African language from Sudan, 1,000 years old. Then how come I don't know any African languages and I read here words written in modern Slavic, Mihail, Cosmos? What a joke! No, this is not some local language from Central Africa. This was language used over continents. The patterns on the traditional Berber embroidery are identical to the patterns of the Slavic people. This is a historic Berber site. The traditional outfits of the Berbers are very similar, if not absolutely identical, with the traditional outfits of some Slavic nations. What you see now are photos of traditional Slavic outfits, and if it is not the caption of the photos, I myself cannot even distinguish are they Berbers or Slavs. Although I'm of East European descent myself, if I'm shown a traditional costume, I cannot say for sure is it Berber or is it Slavic. They are identical, the costumes, and very often even the people who wear them. Despite the obvious connection between the Berbers and the people of Europe that even a small kid will notice, in the mainstream history they are viewed as absolutely independent. Credo Mutwa is a very well known and respected person in all Africa. He is a shaman and religious leader. He still remembers the old history that the native people had before the parasitic forces came and substituted it with lies. In Africa, it's the same as in all continents. The locals were visited by angels, highly advanced beings who were tall, who taught them, educated them. The locals called them Muzungu. They contributed not only to making the locals more civilized, but they also contributed in a very practical manner to the local gene pool. That's why all over Africa, sometimes people with blue eyes or blonde hair get born. So, as in all other continents, both demoniac and angelic species left their genetic stamps.